Today we're talking about the basics at Disney World. This is Go Inform Podcast, episode number 9. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 9 of the Go Inform Podcast. I am your hostess Maven, and today we are talking Disney World. This is day 1 of the series, 10 Days to a Better Disney World Vacation. And I am so happy to have you join me today on the podcast. We're going to be talking about some of the basic statistics about Disney World today to help you get an idea of why it might take 10 days to discuss how to have a better vacation there. So over the next 10 days, we're going to spend some time talking about different aspects of Disney World to help you get a better understanding of what's there, what you can expect, some of the challenges that go along with visiting a place as big as Disney World and as busy and as complicated as it is. I want to demystify some of that for you guys. And also some of what you're going to hear on these 10 days. A lot of this whole series is meant to sort of show you some of the things you might not even know you don't know, so that you can, if there's something that you really want to find out more about, hopefully this will help you get started on that. And I will be giving you resources to further plan for your vacation. So let's just start today with some of the basics about Disney World. And one of the main things, and this is something that comes from my own personal experience, I think a lot of people who are going to visit Disney World just think that Disney World is like a giant Disneyland. And I kind of thought that actually before I went there for the first time. And luckily I did a little bit of research beforehand because it isn't just a giant Disneyland. And you really need to be prepared for the scale of Walt Disney World. So a few things just to give you an idea of what we're talking about here. Disney World as a place is 43 square miles in area. And just to give you an idea, that is about the same size as the city of San Francisco. So it really is kind of a world, Disney World. At Disney World, there are 4 theme parks. There's 2 water parks. There's 4 golf courses. There's a huge shopping and entertainment district, and not to mention a ton of open space. So Disney World is a place that you can just think you're going to a city when you're going to visit there. The theme parks that you're going to find at Disney World are the Magic Kingdom, which is the one that most people think of because that is the park that's the most like Disneyland in California. So there's the Magic Kingdom. There is Epcot. Epcot is the park that has the big thing that looks like a golf ball. So that's kind of the icon. I know some of this is super basic for some of you guys, but I'm just trying to give you this sort of picture in your mind. We're going to get into a lot more detail on this stuff as we move forward. The other 2 theme parks you're going to find there are Hollywood Studios and Animal Kingdom. And in episodes 13 through 16, which will be days 5 through 8 of these 10 days, on each of those days, I'm going to take you on a virtual tour of each of the parks. So we will go into a lot more detail about what kind of some of the highlights that you'll see in each park, and some of the restaurants and other attractions and tips for touring and all that stuff. So we will get a little more into detail, a lot more into detail on that in the coming days. But yeah, just know 4 different theme parks. And you're talking about a city-sized piece of land here. These parks are, most of them are really quite distant from each other. So this is another thing you're going to want to keep in mind when you start planning your trip and how many days you want to spend and maybe where you want to stay, is that you can be talking about a travel time between the parks of, anywhere. It could be half an hour easily to get between one park and another at Disney World. And speaking of where you might stay, you have a lot of choices at Disney World. There are 36 hotels on the property in Disney World, and there's a campground too. So there's over 30,000 hotel rooms at Disney World. I know these numbers can be kind of overwhelming, and when you think about how many hotel rooms there are, that gives you an idea of how many visitors can be in those parks on any given day of the year, especially if you travel during a really peak time of year, like over holidays or in the middle of the summer. You really do have to be aware that there's going to be a lot of people there. So this is another reason, again, for planning, doing your research. You guys are in the right place here. We will be talking a lot about how to make things more efficient for you and more fun and less stressful with the crowds and all of that stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of hotels in episode 11. In a couple episodes from now on day 3, we'll be talking a lot more about the hotels. So make sure you're subscribing to the podcast so you get that episode. According to some of the research I was doing here, Disney World is the largest single-site employer in the United States. It employs over 60,000 cast members. So that is a lot of employees. And by the way, cast members is the Disney term for anybody who works at the Disney parks. I think maybe anyone who works at Disney is a cast member now that I think about it. But definitely in the parks or anywhere at Disney World, any employee you meet is a cast member. And this is an example of how Disney World also kind of has its own language. So there's a lot of kind of jargon and lingo and acronyms, just like almost, NASA has this and places like that. Well, Disney has it too. And it's really, really helpful if you kind of can speak the language and know some of these commonly used phrases and words before you go, because it's going to help you get around and communicate a little bit better. And it's going to help you with your planning too. So tomorrow, the first thing we're going to do in this series tomorrow is we're going to talk about some of those commonly used words and phrases. So you can speak the language and you'll know even in your planning, if you're doing a Google search for something, I'm going to try to give you some of the key terms that will help you figure out the language that they're using for things like restaurant reservations and stuff like that. So please make sure you don't miss that episode tomorrow on episode 10, because I'm afraid I use the lingo too, and I want you guys to know what I'm talking about. Another thing that Disney World has kind of all to itself, its own thing, is its transportation system. So in Disney World, there is a complete transportation system of buses, trains, monorails, ferries, various kinds of boats, and they even now have their own sort of version of Uber. So there's a lot to know with that as well. And they also have their own transport between Disney World and the Orlando airport. So this is another component in your trip there that you're going to want to know about so that you can plan how you want to get around when you're staying or visiting Disney World. And we'll be talking about the transportation kind of all throughout most of the episodes because it's just going to be a common thread. Getting around there is a big part of your day and planning for your day. So I'll be giving you guys lots of tips and information about the transportation system. So those are some of the main pieces of information, kind of the big numbers that I wanted to give you here on our first day talking about Disney World. And as we move forward, again, we'll be getting into a lot more detail about some of these various aspects of your trip. It really does make a difference if you have some of this information before you get there. And it's going to help you hit the ground running, and you guys are going to be the pros when you show up at Disney World. And that's really my goal with the podcast. Now, these 10 episodes, again, my idea here is to give you kind of a basic understanding of different components of visiting Disney World. And then as the podcast itself moves forward in future episodes, I'm going to be circling back and getting into a lot more detail about some of these topics and sharing some more hacks and tips and stuff. But I really hope that you'll join me for the rest of these 10 episodes to get that basic understanding and insight and excitement for your upcoming vacation. So I will see you tomorrow. We'll talk about some of the commonly used words and phrases at Disney World. And if you haven't already subscribed to the podcast, hop over to your favorite app where you listen to podcasts and hit the subscribe button. That way you won't miss any of the upcoming episodes. And I thank you so much for joining me today on our first day of your 10 days to a better Disney World vacation. And I hope you have a marvelous vacation.